Talking Cat Studios video tutorial on Photoshop. Today we're going to be taking this nice daytime image and turning it into a nighttime image like this. Now, to do that, as you see, we're going to have to treat the background differently than we do the foreground. The background there has to be separated out, and I'm going to show you a neat trick for doing that. Now, when we look at this thing, we can tell the background is colored differently than the foreground. But how do we know exactly what to pull out? Well, we can go to Channels, and this is showing us the RGB. This is everything. Everybody's in there. RGB basically tells you right here in the Channels panel, it tells you who's in charge of what you're seeing, which band is producing most of the visuals that you're seeing. So if we click on just red, we see, well, there's a lot of red everywhere. Pulling the red out of this wouldn't really give us a separation much. Go to green, it's even worse. Oh, but blue. Blue is the guy we want, so we're going to take blue out of this. Go back over to your layers panel, and like always, Control J to copy your layer, because we don't want to mess with our original. We are going to hide it though. Turn off that little all-seeing eye there, because if we don't, it's going to overwrite anything we do to this, and we won't be able to get our effect. We won't see it. So double click over here off on the right side of the layer, and we get the layer style panel, which has this neat blend if area here, which is something if you haven't really explored much, please do. When it's on gray, it's doing luminosity, which could help us quite a bit, but probably not exactly what we want. But if you pull down that drop down menu, you see it shows us all of the bands of the RGB. What we really want is we want this blue, right? Because that's where all of our light color was in the alpha channel. That's where everything was at. So we pull this back, let's say about 150, 160 maybe, somewhere in there. We see that the background is all gone transparent. And we're left with just the trees, the bushes, the ground. We're left with the foreground, and that's what we want, but maybe it's a little too sharp. So we can soften it up by alt-clicking on that slider, take the right side of it, and pull it until you're satisfied, right? Somewhere in there. That's good. Click OK on that. So now we have something that will let us basically mask off the foreground and the background from each other. What we need to do is we go to background, Control J, it's another copy. And go ahead and turn on that new copy. And we can go ahead and name this foreground. Okay, now if we hide this background copy, we see transparency there, so that's going to let whatever's underneath it show through. And this foreground copy is going to overwrite whatever is it's blocking. So that allows us to treat the background separately from the foreground. As long as we have the foreground copy in front of the background copy or higher up in the layer stack, it's going to work. So click on the background copy so that our next layer comes up on top of that or between the two. So go down to your adjustment layers, choose a solid color, and then find something kind of midnight blue, right? Something like that. And let's turn that on to multiply. Drop the opacity back a little bit. Maybe something around, I don't know, right about there looks good. Okay, so you can see we've had a nice effect on it, but it's not quite the effect we want, right? And in fact, we want to affect this whole thing. We want to affect the foreground and the background. So click on the foreground so our next layer goes above it, and then go to Color Lookup Layer and add that. Now this lets us choose amongst a number of files here that will have different effects. And if you haven't played with these, I really do recommend it. Please do. You will be amazed at what you can do with this. We're going to choose Midnight or Moonlight on this one. And as you can see, that's perfect. That's wonderful. We can still barely make out the details in the back. Kind of more like a texture than a details. That's great. What we really need to do now, though, is, well, we're going to fake a light source. Because if you look at these shrubs and the trees and everything like that, we really do have some highlighting going on there that is implying a light source. But we want to bring both of those out. So let's add an implied light source. We're going to do that with the brush tool. Okay, and you're going to want a nice zero hardness, soft, round, decent sized brush. That might be too big. Like that. Go up here in the corner. Don't have to have the whole thing in there. You can do this with a black foreground. Go to about there, slide back a little. And every time you slide a little farther back, it's going to give you a little bit more. And then lower your size, increase your flow a little bit, and click a few times there. Now, to increase its effect, go down to that blue color, that midnight blue color fill layer, and do that a couple of times. We're going to apply the moons right about here, right? And so we're getting all this, but we still don't have the detail and depth we really want. So on the color lookup layer, which is the one that's affecting everything, remember it's the one that's affecting the foreground especially, is what we're really concerned about. And we want to take our flow down to about 7-8%, somewhere in there, something like that. And we're going to paint highlights on. It's going to let a little bit more of that foreground color come through. Alright, so we can do stuff like this, and every time you paint on it, it becomes accumulative. And you can see how that just kind of fades in. And you just do these little clicks down there with that flow down solo. Now what flow does is flow is like if you've ever painted on something, like a miniature, or sometimes even oil painting, I guess, that has texture, and you have a dry brush. There's not a whole lot of paint on it. And you brush on it really quickly and rapidly, and it builds up paint very slowly. Well, that's kind of what flow is doing. It's only painting on the raised up areas, and it's leaving those areas down in the cracks and crevices dark, like no light's getting into them. And we just do that across the whole painting. You want to do it nice and smooth. Be conscious of where the light is, because you're kind of doing ray tracing in a way. Those of you who are gamers who are aware of what ray tracing is by now, I'm sure. You're just kind of following that light. And kind of painting in those areas, and you just click several times. You don't have to do a swipe. You can click several times on a given spot, and it'll just build up on that spot. It's really, really cool how this works. But anything that light is coming in on, you want to do it. You want to try and kind of fade it around. One word to the wise on this: I've done several attempts, or several go-throughs of this to make sure I could do it from memory and get very similar results. Less is more. I've experimented a bit with this, and less is usually more. You don't want to do too much, because you can really play with this until you get everything just really too bright. Okay, so now we got to do the tree trunks, and you can really play with this more if you want to get it more realistic. This is just a real quick kind of demo thing, but we have to do the tree trunks. And for the tree trunks, I found that around 15% is good. And you're going to want a smaller brush. Now, if you're really going to make this look good, you're going to take your time and zoom in on it and all that kind of stuff. I'm trying to be as conscious of the clock as I am anything else, so try not to make this take too long. And just paint some highlights on the moon side, because remember, there's a line coming down the middle of that tree, and that's the max circumference of the tree. That's the thickest that tree is going to get, and anything to the moon side, or to the light source side, is going to have a little bit of light on it. Right? Anything facing away from it is, of course, not. So it's going to stay dark. We're not going to paint on that. Now, you see here I overdone it. We can press X, and that's going to change our foreground color to white, and that's going to paint that moonlight back on there. You can press X again, you're back on your black, and you can go about it. Now, the thing is, these trees back here are right behind this one and this one. So I'm not going to paint them. I'm not going to do them. I'm not going to highlight them at all because they're being blocked. They're not getting any of that light. So just gotta take your time. And if some areas highlight more than others, that's okay too, because you can have stuff up over here that's like blocking that light, and it's gonna look mottled. It's gonna look, it's gonna look more natural. So that looks all right. Might want to take that down a hair right there. All right, now our next thing, especially if you go back and look at the original picture, but you can still see it here. You don't even need to go back and look at it. You can see it, we're a lot lighter here in color, and it's kind of fading out this way. It's kind of coming around this shadow, and there's a shadow here. There's shadows here, so we got light coming in this way, and we got light coming across that way and coming across here. So all we want to do is we want to take this flow back down. This time I'm going to take it to about 4%, because this is going to be a little bit more subtle. It's not reflecting quite the same, but this is about the same. Okay, so we want to paint over that, maybe a couple layers. Kind of thread it out. Don't forget about this little patch over here. And we want to bring this through like that, preserving that shadow area. It might be a bit too much, so don't be afraid to undo. Undoing and going back and painting over stuff, those are not rookie things. Those are everybody things. Everybody has to do that, so don't be afraid of that. It's not the I suck button. Don't worry about it. So just to bring out a little bit more here, some more of these plant tips that are highest sticking out, and you can play with this all day long, and get it really good. Now, the one other thing I might add would be like a contrast layer. So brightness, contrast, add that up at the very top, and drag that contrast up just a hair, so the darker areas get darker and the lighter areas get darker, and you might have to adjust for that with the brightness. But I mean, that looks pretty good to me. Play with it, enjoy it. This is a really good one for learning to follow light and see how it plays off of solid surfaces and more modeled surfaces and ground surfaces, and how that light plays through there. It's a really good one to learn with. But this is Talking Cat Studios signing off, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.